Video, I'd like to show you how to get started on part B of assignment number 7. So you'll need a few things in order to complete this assignment. I've put some of these in your week 7 folder already. There'll be a few more in here by the time you watch this video. So you're going to need a copy of the assignment 7B, which will be in the folder. You'll also need access to a linear regression applet, which is in the folder. So I'm going to go ahead and open that right now. See if I can open that up here. Okay, and here we have the linear regression applet. It's an applet for making dot plots. We're going to use that. You'll also need the spreadsheet that contains all the data for this assignment. So I'm going to open that up as well, show you what it looks like. So here you have a spreadsheet of data. Let's see, so this first one looks like it's some survey data for different students where their forearm and foot lengths were measured. Looks like they've also kept track of how many states a student has visited. So it's all a survey of students collecting this kind of information. There's also something for a series of boys, their heights and weights at different ages. Let's see, looks like we have different states and total population, urban population, rural population, so data on state populations. There's some data about different airlines and how many bags they tend to mishandle, and also their on-time arrival rates. And finally, there's one on, it looks like SAT math scores in different states of the United States, the percentage of students who actually take the exam and what the average score is. So all kinds of data here. And so we'll need access to that. And then the only other thing you'll need access to is for yourself, you'll want to open up for yourself a blank Google Doc, because you're going to be doing a lot of sort of pasting and typing of responses. So again, if you've got that Google Doc, you've got the linear regression applet, and you've got the data, and then of course the directions for assignment 7B, you'll be all set. So let me walk you through the very first example. So in the first example, I ask you to look at forearm length versus foot length and to see if there's a relationship. For example, do students with longer forearms tend to have bigger feet, or vice versa? Do students with maybe longer forearms have got shorter feet? So what you'll do with this information is you'll want to highlight and copy all the information. I don't think you want to highlight the titles. So I'm going to try it without the titles, and there's quite a bit of data here. Let's see, about 55 students it looks like, so I'm going to copy that. And so then I'll go over to the linear regression applet. And so again, we'll have to get rid of what was already preloaded. So we're going to enter our own data. Let's see, if I remember, the X variable was the forearm length. And then this was foot length. And I believe these were in inches. I'll try to clean that up before you actually have to do this assignment. So forearm length and foot length. Then if you just kind of click into one of the cells and then just paste, it should paste all of the data from the spreadsheet. So that's kind of a nice feature. You can just kind of copy and paste both sets of data in one step. After you've done that, you're then going to click on Submit Data. And let's see what it does here. So it makes a scatter plot for us. So we have a scatter plot here of all this stuff. It looks like it gives us some summary data information as well. Now there's some other features which I'm not going to have you get into on this assignment. We'll start getting into this stuff, next week. But there are ways to kind of add something called a regression line, which is like a line of best fit. You can play around with the different headings. There's some different sort of regression statistics. You can put in something called an ANOVA table, which we'll make use of. We might have this thing called standard errors and p-values. So there'll be all kinds of features. But for this assignment, you don't really need to do any of those things. You just want to get a scatter plot. And so your first task is, once you've made that scatter plot, is you're going to want to get a screenshot of that. And there might be actually a screenshot option within the applet itself, but I'll go ahead and copy that. And so then I want to go to my Google document. And so this first one was like forearm length versus foot length. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to paste that information on there. So let me see if I can get at it here. Where did I put it? Okay, there it is. My screenshot. Okay, I'm sorry, that didn't show up on the screen very well. You're probably better at taking screenshots than I am. And so it just kind of pasted everything on there. And so I'm not sure what this little gray bar is. Hopefully you won't have that problem. Then I'll hit return a few times. And so, okay, so like I said, probably should title this too. This was assignment 7B. Okay, so now I can get back to the document. So one task is to kind of paste the data into the applet, make a scatter plot, and then you have to respond to a few items. The first question is, then describe the distribution. So we're going to start with the cases, and we say, well, who was it, that provided this information? In this case, the cases were the 55 students, and those were who provided this information. Then there's the variables. Okay. In this case, there are two variables. If we go back here, there's the forearm length, that's one variable, and the foot length, that's another variable. So the variables are, let's see, the forearm length and the foot length. So those are your two variables. So then the next thing you're asked to describe is the association. Okay, so in the association we look for three things. We kind of look at this arrangement of dots, and we look to see, first of all, we look for kind of a direction. This looks like things are going in what's called a positive direction. They're starting from low and going high. So you have positive direction. If your dots are kind of going downward like this, we call it negative direction. So this one looks like it's positive. You then also want to talk about what we call the shape. In this case, we're looking to see if things are linear or if they're curved. And this one looks like it's fairly linear. The dots look like it's a pretty straight line. Sometimes the dots will really kind of bend and curve, and we would call that a curve shape. So to me, this looks like it's a positive. It looks like it's linear. And then we have to talk about what's called the strength of the association. So when your dots are just scattered all about, they really just have no real pattern to them, we would call that a pretty weak association. And if the dots are kind of lined up pretty well, we would call that a strong association. And then if it's somewhere in between, we would call it a moderate. So this one, believe it or not, actually looks like it's a fairly strong pattern here. And so for my association, I'm going to say Let's see, it would be, looks like I'm going to go with a strong linear and positive. Let me change the order of that. Let's go with a strong, positive, and linear association. The order in which you write the words really isn't that important, but as long as you talk about the strength, the direction, and then whether it's linear or curved, that's how you describe association. The next thing you have to describe is called the trend. Okay? Now in the trend, it's kind of a restatement of the association, except you're going to use the actual context. And the way you look at it is you say, okay, well, I've got all these students with different forearm lengths. So the students who have the longer forearm lengths, it seems to me, it looks like they also happen to have the longer foot lengths. So students with the higher forearm or the longer forearm lengths tend to have the longer foot lengths. So I'll try to write that now. Let's see. Students with higher forearm length, I should probably say longer. Students with longer forearms tend to, and this is very important, tend to is a very important phrase to use here, tend to have longer foot lengths. Okay? Students with longer forearms tend to have the longer foot lengths. Or you could also say the students with the shorter forearms also tend to have the shorter foot lengths. And that's what's called the trend. You want to try and use the two variables and bring the students in. So your cases and variables kind of get mentioned in the trend. And again, the tend to. Okay? And so then after the trend, we talk about generalization. And this one's always kind of tricky. Okay? This data here is based upon 55 students who we surveyed. And we're wondering, can this pattern be generalized to perhaps a bigger population? And the answer could be, well, yeah, maybe. Let's say this was a random sample of 55 Piedmont High School students. We could then certainly generalize to say, okay, this pattern we believe would apply to all PHS students. Okay, so maybe for generalization, we could say the trend applies to all PHS students. That could be one type of generalization you could make. Perhaps you could say this trend applies to all people in California, or perhaps this trend applies to all people in the world. And that's what we mean by generalizations. Can you take this pattern and say, okay, I think this is going to apply to a bigger group, and the question is, how big, would that group be? Okay, so you try to see if the trend applies. Now, sometimes you'll look at it and go, well, no, this really only applies maybe to elementary school kids. It doesn't really apply to high school kids. So you have to be a little careful when you write the generalization. And then the last thing you're going to look for is what's called the explanation. And what we're looking for in explanation is would we say that there's a cause and effect relationship? In other words, does having a longer forearm cause you to have a longer foot length? Or does the longer foot length cause you to have the longer forearm length? Or the third explanation is, well, no, neither one causes the other, but they're both based upon a third characteristic. And so in this case, I would probably lean towards that. I would say, well, just because you've got a longer forearm, that's not what's making your foot bigger, and the length of your foot's not affecting the length of your forearm. There's kind of what we call a lurking variable here, which is probably your genetics. That's probably the things that tend to make you kind of taller, also, happen to give you probably longer forearms and bigger feet. So I would probably say it's kind of your genetics. Okay. You might also say maybe age. The older you get, your forearms tend to grow and your feet tend to grow up until a certain point. So, and again, we call these sort of the lurking variables, the variables that are, if we would kind of say, kind of the root cause of what you're seeing here. So, and that'll do it. That takes care of the first problem. So it's you put it in the applet and you produce a scatter plot and you paste it onto your document, and then you address these different things. You respond to what are the cases, what are the variables, describing the association, describe the trend, decide whether or not you can generalize what you're seeing, and to what extent you could generalize. And then finally, the explanation. Is one thing the cause of the other? Or is it more a case of there's a third variable involved here that's kind of the driving factor with the other two? Okay, and so you'll do that and do that for each of the scenarios. I think I give you about 6 or 7 different scenarios to look at. Maybe make this a little bold so it kind of stands out. And then just as you do these, you might just do like 1 per page. You might be able to shrink these things down, so maybe you can get two problems on a page. But please don't turn this in with your work kind of cut off between two different pages. So play around with the formatting on here. Once you're done with this, you'll print it out and you'll be submitting it with the rest of assignment 7. So that's all I've got for now. Thanks for watching.